Lions fans, hello. This is Brad Holmes, new general manager for the Detroit Lions. Excited to get to work. Looking forward to building this team with a collaborative approach and efforts to deliver a winner to this great city of Detroit, this passionate fan base, and to uplift the community. One pride.
The Detroit Lions have once again pinned their hopes of resurrection into the conversation of relevancy on a first-time GM who's wet behind the ears but who possesses an impressive resume in Los Angeles Rams Director of College Scouting, Brad Holmes. And it also appears that the team is on the precipice of naming their next head coach in New Orleans Saints assistant head coach Dan Campbell, who also has a stint playing for the Lions during their 0-16 season. So the question remains, will this pairing of youthful leaders lead to brighter days for a franchise that has not won a championship since 1957? Friend of the program and 97.1 The Ticket sports producer and anchor Jake Riepma returns to the program to provide his perspective on what these moves mean for the future of the Lions. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Hey, Jake, it's always great to see you, and I want to welcome you back to the program, and we'll attempt to tackle some Detroit Lions football as they've made some leadership changes. Always great to see you, and thanks for a few minutes, buddy.
Kevin, it's always a treat for me. The pleasure is all mine. Pumped to be here, jacked up to talk more Lions football. And you know what? It's one of those things, and you and I were talking about this before I hopped on. It's one of those things that if it means our paths are crossing and we got to talk a little bit more Lions, even how painful it may be, I'm always up for it and always looking forward to it, my friend.
Well, Jake, there's more than one way to skin a cat, so we'll try to skin this one as delicately as we can, buddy.
So yeah, that sounds good, man. There's a lot to get into, that's for sure.
Absolutely, Jake. I'm curious to get your thoughts on the direction the franchise decided to go. Obviously, bringing in a first-time general manager and what looks like a first-time head coach.
Yeah, look, I mean, we've done the think outside the box thing before, the routine, and we've tried to poach guys that have had success and in their tenures prior to coming to Detroit, and we know what that's happened and what that looked like. So maybe this time will be different, but first with Holmes, the guy has a proven track record in drafting, and that's the area the Lions have struggled in so much. And, the success he brought the Los Angeles Rams, and, he wasn't at the very top, but certainly responsible for some important decisions made on the college scouting front. And then with Holmes, it's totally a different approach. It's kind of that pendulum hire. Instead of getting the X's and O's guy like they did with Patricia, they're trying to get more of the charismatic leader of men, a guy that, rallied his guys and wasn't always keen on the X's and O's. Not to say he's not a bright football mind, but he was more, more fancied himself as a motivation guy in New Orleans, and the guys would run through a brick wall for him. So maybe that will translate into the players loving Campbell. I mean, we know the type of relationship and the strife that was there between Patricia and superstar players. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. When Patricia was let go, all of the former players and current players sounding off on how happy they were that Patricia was gone. So I think the Lions have learned their lesson on trying to hire a guy that wasn't going to necessarily gel and connect with the players. So maybe it'll be different this time around.
Jake, and I know that you were a Robert Saleh guy, and he obviously went to the Jets. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on where they ultimately went with Dan Campbell. Like you said, he's going to be more of a CEO type, but I'm curious to get your thoughts because Sheila Ford-Hamp and Rod Wood said that the organization doesn't have the stomach for sort of a rebuild, so more of a retool. So I'm just wondering your thoughts on that sentiment.
Yeah, it's a little scary, to be honest with you, Kevin. I mean, this team needed to rebuild last year. I wanted them to draft a quarterback. I wanted Tua, and I will die on that take. And, it's looking like Herbert's going to be the better quarterback. But the point being, I wanted them to rebuild through a generational talent at quarterback last year and let Matthew Stafford go last year so they weren't in this predicament. But they didn't. There's no sense in crying over spilled milk. But they're still refusing to completely buy into a total rebuild. So that portion of it is scary. But I want to address the kind of the approach to bringing in a guy like Campbell. And I do think there's something to be excited about in terms of the way he'll relate to players. And you got to think, again, you said I was a solid guy. I think he's going to be a tremendous head coach in the National Football League. And he also brought that charisma, that fight, that passion that players resonate with so well. And although he did it on the defensive side of the ball, I have a theory that that's what scared the Lions away from him, because the quote unquote defensive hire and the defensive guy in Matt Patricia turned out so poorly. They were afraid of going down that exact same road where the NFL has shown time and time again that it is a quarterback driven league. It is an offensive league. No longer, you can't cling to the cliche that championships win games anymore in the NFL. It's the offenses that win games. And so I think the Lions, and I don't want to speak for Sheila Ford-Hamp and Robert Woods and whatnot, but the point being, I think they were afraid to go with a defensive-minded coach like Saleh, which is why you see Campbell as the next head coach for the Lions.
And Jake, I'm also curious to ask you, how much of a sell job do you think the Lions had to do for this job? Because I told someone earlier today that it's not like people were knocking down the door to take over the Lions. And I realize that there are only 32 of these jobs, but how much of a sell job do you think the Lions had to do, and how much of a product of Campbell being here is a person that would say yes to taking this job in particular?
Yeah, wouldn't it be fun to be a bug on the wall in those meetings to see exactly what all in those interviews and see exactly how they all unwinded and how they all played out? Because I have those same questions, and really, I guess it is one person's best guess over another's. But I do think that you said something that was exactly the words that came to mind. There are only 32 jobs in the entire world that represent being the head coach or the general manager of a National Football League franchise. And so I think there's a lot of value in that. And yes, it might not be as appealing as Jacksonville. And you look at what Urban Meyer's got and all the cap space they have and the number one overall pick. Of course, I would be crazy to suggest that the Lions job was as appealing as that. But if you start doing the comparison thing, there's a reason all of these teams are retooling and starting over, because they were bad. They were terrible. The Lions were terrible. The Jets were terrible. The Chargers were terrible. And Jacksonville is terrible. That's why they need to bring in a new head coach, and some of the organizations like the Lions need to bring in new management and that sort of thing. And so, yes, there had to be some sort of element of selling why this is better than those other organizations that are also retooling. But at the end of the day, look at Campbell, look at Holmes. Both those guys are better now in terms of career development and where they're going in life and what they're doing now as the general manager and head coach respectively of the Detroit Lions than an assistant coach for the Saints and in the front office or the director of college scouting for the Los Angeles Rams.
Now, Jake, we're expected to hear from Brad Holmes at the top of the hour in his first press conference meeting with the media. What will you be listening for when we see Brad Holmes meet the media at the top of the hour, buddy?
Kevin, you might hate this answer, but I will forever be a anti-press conference guy. I don't care what they say. There's no winning the press conferences. The Lions have won more press conferences in the last 3 decades than any other teams. What does that translate to on the field? Nothing. I know I'm getting a little animated on you, but I never understood that, rah at the microphone. Yeah, let's win the press conference. No. Yes, you want to see some charisma, some excitement, some pride in being the head coach of the Lions, and say the right things, but it's not an end all be all. It's not a make or break thing for me. And of course, no coach is going to go up there and say, yeah, I think we're going to lose a lot of games. They're going to bring the passion and the energy, but it doesn't do anything for me, whether they're speaking at a press conference and saying we're going to win every single game and win the Super Bowl, or if they just stand up there, say what needs to be said and move on. I'm not a big press conference guy, but I respect the question. I respect the process. I know it's important. He has to address the team for the first time, and it's a big thing for media guys. I guess I'm a media guy too, and I would be there if I had the access to, and I'm sure, we're going to be breaking down everything he says, but I'm not a big win the press conference guy. So it's a very, very minor on the scale for me.
Hey, I'll send a paramedic to check your blood pressure after that question, Jake. So I'm also curious to know, how would you judge this tenure for Brad Holmes as a success as the new Lions general manager?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think a lot of it's going to depend on what we do with number 9 and how this franchise wants to move forward. Do we want to, you talk about the retool versus the rebuild, and that scares me because I've said it time and time again on your podcast, on my podcast, on the radio, whoever would listen to me, that I think the world of Matthew Stafford. He's done so much for this organization. He's the best quarterback we've ever had. Yeah, right. Well, I'm trying to give the guy the benefit of the doubt, Kevin, but you know what I'm saying. He's given his heart and soul to this city. He's done a lot for the community. He's connected with all of us, but he hasn't won the playoff games. And in 12 years, that's enough proof in the pudding. That's a big enough sample size. And I apologize because I'm sounding like a broken record, but the point remains the same. I think it's time for a healthy divorce, move on, and see what kind of value you can get in draft capital from trading Matthew Stafford. I think of a team like the Washington football team, who was a quarterback away from being a legitimate contender and maybe would be willing to give up some first round draft capital, which the Lions obviously need so that they can better begin that rebuilding process. And if they do that, I think you give Campbell ample time. You give him plenty of opportunities to implement his system and to really start from the ground up and begin the rebuilding process, not the retooling process.
Jake, you might have hated my press conference question, and I hate when people ask me this next question about culture. So in the spirit of being fair, I'll ask you the question anyway.
I love it.
In terms of building a culture, I hate that word because the Lions have tried to build a culture since I was 3 years old when they last won a playoff game. But that's okay. I'm 32 now, Jake, and I haven't won the Super Bowl yet, but I'm still waiting. I won't hold my breath because I'll die by the time.
Yeah, so you think I need a paramedic? You start holding your breath for a Lions Super Bowl, we're going to be in all sorts of a world of hurt, my friend.
Anyway, the question, Jake, is how do you think they go about building a culture where they can win versus always hoping to win? Sort of the philosophy they've adopted since we've all been watching the team.
For sure. And 2 different ways to tackle this. There's the there's the obvious but very simple and almost, downright insulting to all of our listeners, but I'm still going to say it anyways. Winning cures all. Just win, baby. How many times do we see that on the introduction to Hard Knocks a couple of years with the Al Davis? Just win, baby. So if you just win, the rest takes care of itself. And I know that's being overly simplistic. So I apologize. But if you want to build a culture, win and have the right guys to do so. And everybody talks about this. Like you said, you hate the question. And if there was a perfect way to do it, every team would implement it. Every team would build the culture the right way. But it takes it takes a number of different factors, and luck is part of that. So I think getting off to the right start, connecting with the players, knowing that your players are going to get your best. Of course, speaking from the coach and the management's perspective, they're going to get your best. And in return, you're going to get the best from the players every down, every play, every practice, doing the right things on the field and off the field. And I know they're all cliches, so I do apologize, but that's the long-winded, roundabout answer to how to build the right cultures, doing the right thing and doing the right thing for each other and winning for each other on all levels, players, coaches, management.
Now, Jake, if they do rip off the Band-Aid and trade Matthew Stafford, they only have 5 picks. You would assume if they do that, they'll get more picks. So I'm wondering your thoughts on Brad Holmes' approach to the draft. And certainly it's been a sore spot for this franchise for many years. So I'm wondering your thoughts on whether you think the Lions may have an advantage now that they've hired someone that's shown some success in the draft as well.
Right. I mean, we know that's why Brad Holmes was brought in, because of how he's the draft guru, so to speak. And so right now, a team with only 5 draft picks, that's not as appealing. You want to let the guy do his thing, which is draft the next generation of Lions talent, which is kind of scary to say out loud because it's been such a failure in years past. But this is a different regimen and a different opportunity for the Lions front office to make amends, so to speak. And so because of that, I would love for them to, like you said, just rip the Band-Aid off with Matthew Stafford, make the trades and get some, hopefully you would hope they'd be able to get first round draft capital for Matthew Stafford. And there's some franchises that make it very, very appealing. I already said the Washington football team, a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers with our Big Ben is we saw him in the playoffs. You got to believe he's on his way out. The Saints are a little bit different because they're so far over the cap. I don't think they'd be in a position to make a trade for a player like Matthew Stafford simply because of the salary cap, and that would put them in a world of hurt financially. So I while the Saints roster makes sense, their payroll does not. A team like Denver, that all kinds of weaponry for Matthew Stafford to throw the ball to, and they could give up some first round draft capital. And again, it's a lot of hypotheticals, but I would love to see Dan Holmes have the opportunity to start the rebuild Dan Campbell as the head coach, Brad Holmes. I'm already getting mixed up, but to have the opportunity to kind of start with a fresh slate.
And I'm going to play devil's advocate for you, and I don't mean to medicate you, Jake, but I'll send you a virtual pill before I ask you this question. If they do end up keeping Matthew Stafford and sort of do the retool approach, how would you view success in that regard if they did end up keeping Matthew Stafford?
I mean, you got to win then. If I know that's thanks, Jake, you got to win, but really, I mean, you got to, if that's what you're doing, there's 9-7 is not acceptable. Making the playoffs and sneaking in and losing in the first round, is that really worth it? I mean, aren't we trying to build a title contending team? So look at the NFC North. Are we really beating the Green Bay Packers and winning the division? I mean, the Bears are in a better spot than we are. And you could even argue that the Vikings are. So if that's the approach, there's a lot to overcome. And I think you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball because the 6-10, the 7-9, it's brutal, man. It's so much. It's just meddling in mediocrity, and there's no way to improve what this Lions team can get to if that's going to be the approach. Because frankly, I think it's the wrong one. But I go back to my original statement, which winning cures all. So if they choose to do that and they win and just win, baby, then you know what? I'll have egg on my face, and they made me a liar.
I'm kind of thinking you won't, but that's okay. Jake, I'm also going to ask you. Obviously, Dan Campbell's assistant coaches are going to be important, and if they end up keeping Darrell Bevel as offensive coordinator and keeping Stafford, do you think continuity in terms of the coaching staff will pay dividends at all?
I do. I think if again it goes back to that pivotal decision, if you do decide to keep Stafford around and you want that element of continuity, I think that's better than keeping Stafford around and bringing a whole new core of coaches in. Although I would be again more in favor for the complete rebuild and bringing his entire staff in and wiping the slate clean. And that's no disrespect to Darrell Bevel because I think he did a great job in a very tough situation. And his back was up against it. I think he'll be a head coach in this league at some point. But obviously he's not going to be the head coach for the Detroit Lions. And so I don't know if that's the direction you're going. I disagree with it, but I think it would be more conducive to trying to retool and win now, which again, I use the caveat that if they win, it is the right thing to do. And that's pointing out the obvious. But that said, Bevel should remain with Stafford as the offense. If Stafford's going to stay, Bevel should stay as well to keep that continuity and maybe get some wins.
Well, Jake, they're not going to win anything if they don't fix the defense.
That's true.
And we've talked extensively about how to fix the defense, but going into the draft with the 7th pick, knowing everything you know now, what would you do with the pick, knowing the state of the defense and the team, Bud?
Yeah, this is a fun conversation because it's so hypothetical. And listen, I've on my podcast earlier this week, I said, if Devontae Smith's there, maybe I'm greedy and just say, hey, draft the Heisman Trophy winner. That would be a lot of fun. And this team's not going anywhere anyways, especially if they're just trying to retool on offense. But I think if Micah Parsons, the linebacker out of Penn State, is there, that's a guy it'd be very difficult to pass up on because, like you said, there's so many holes in the defense and they need a day one starter, an impact player on the defensive side of the ball. And I believe, and many people believe, Micah Parsons out of Penn State can be that guy. Then there's the quarterback situation, which again, if they do what I hope they do, which is completely start over, that would include drafting a quarterback. And you'd hope a guy like Zach Wilson out of BYU is there at number 7, and even Trey Lance. So let's say, we know Trevor Lawrence is going 1. Many believe Justin Fields will be off the board early as well, unless the Jets make some trades. And then it just turns into how long Zach Wilson stays around, because I believe Zach Wilson's the 3rd best quarterback and Trey Lance the 4th best quarterback. Even if all 4 of those guys go before the 7th pick and the Lions haven't changed the draft positions, then I think you got to go Parsons or even Devontae Smith.
Hey, Jake, my final question for you today is, how would you define a successful offseason for the Lions?
Trade Stafford, acquire some draft capital, start over, draft a quarterback, and reboot this franchise. And it might be a long uphill climb, but what we've been dealing with over the better portion of decades and decades and decades have been a long uphill climb. So we might as well do it right this time around and start with a complete rebuild under the direction of Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell.
Well, we've only been waiting since 1964, so what's another couple of years, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Jake, you mentioned it a couple of times. I know you have a new podcast, buddy, so how can people follow the new work you're putting out there, bud?
Yeah, definitely, Kevin. I appreciate it. The Michigan State of Sports, a good friend of mine, Tony Garcia, and I rap about the Michigan State of Sports, so both college sports and pro sports in our great state of Michigan. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and of course Spotify, and anywhere you get your podcasts. It's Michigan State of Sports, and we always tweet it out as well. So if you're on Twitter, I'm on Twitter at Jake_Riepma, and the Michigan State of Sports has its own Twitter account as well at Mish State of Sports, because Twitter doesn't like those long handles. So Michigan State of Sports was a little bit too long, but follow me at Jake_Riepma. I always put all my work and content out there. I appreciate it, Kevin.
Fantastic. Dick. Always great to see you, and buckle up your seatbelt for another Lions off season. It should be interesting, buddy.
All right, sounds good, my friend. It's always a blast to do this, and I know I end it the same way. Again, it's a broken record, but anytime I'm all yours, and I love being a part of Let's Have This Conversation.
Yeah, I think this is your fourth appearance already, buddy. You're racking them up. Yeah,
Repeat guest, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to send you a commission check.
Yeah, there you go. Well,
days,
Kevin,
bud.
in my dating life, I don't usually get a call back, so at least you call me back.
Well, sometimes you have to turn over a stone a couple of times before you can see what's underneath it there, buddy. So there
Yeah,
you go.
no doubt, no doubt.
But always great to see you, and best of luck with everything going on in your 97 won the ticket and all your future endeavors, bud.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it.